The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Hey, Kara Oosterhuis here with RealAgriculture.com. We are back here today with another Canola School episode, and I have here with me Keith Gabert with the Canola Council of Canada. How's it going today?
Going really well, Kara. We had a good turnout.
Absolutely. So we're here today talking about liming in your canola crop, specifically when it comes to clubroot and what sort of impacts you could potentially have there. Do you want to elaborate?
Sure. So one of the things that we've talked about with clubroot is the importance of using clubroot resistant genetics, lengthening your rotation to 1 in 3. Most growers are familiar with our logic for those reasons, and they understand that 90% of those clubroot spores can die with a 2-year break, so a 1 in 3 rotation. That's really critical if you have a shorter rotation than that and you're looking at improving your ability to manage clubroot. But the challenge is that 90% of those spores die, and if you do have a serious clubroot patch, and we don't have clubroot behind us, but we do have a patch of lime applied to the surface of the soil, 90% of those spores may die in a 1 in 3 rotation. But 10% of the spores in a significant clubroot infestation is still way too many clubroot spores. We're talking from moving from billions of spores per gram of soil down to 1 million spores per gram of soil. That's still a significant infestation, and it puts a lot of pressure on your clubroot resistant genetics. So one of the additional tools that we'd like growers to consider is some patch management. So patch management can be as simple as just not disturbing that soil and leaving it be. Perhaps not as wise as seeding that area to grass so that it stays in place and doesn't turn into a weedy mess. But one of the other steps is actually adding lime to that soil and incorporating it well into the topsoil. We have some really good research that indicates if we can bring the pH up to about 7.2, particularly for areas that are below that, obviously, if we can bring the soil pH up to about 7.2, that the calcium present with that treatment and the pH adjustment really make it an inhospitable climate or inhospitable growing area for the clubroot galls. So we've seen good evidence that we can inhibit clubroot gall formation with that increase in pH. Now that's almost a full point higher than you would increase the pH for agronomic reasons. You know, if you've got acid soil, you might target 6.5 to improve your soil tilth, improve phosphorus availability, get some yield benefits out of increasing your soil pH and moving out of that acid soil zone. But if you move a full point higher, we can actually inhibit clubroot. So this is one of the other tools, and obviously you're going to use all those tools in combination, but this is one of those other tools that if you have a real hot spot or if you want to treat an area by the gate and make it less hospitable for clubroot, this is a pretty good tool.
Now, of course, liming is nothing new. However, when we're looking at the side of clubroot, that is kind of a new idea. If a producer has never done this before, what's your number one tip?
So my number one tip is, thankfully, it's a small area. Liming's not that familiar in Western Canada. It's a common practice anywhere where people farm. If you farm long enough, your soil pH will drop slowly over time. If you really intensively farm, your soil pH drops a little quicker. So you are going to need to lime to combat soil acidity. If you started with naturally acid soil in the first place, then that problem just gets worse. So the biggest tip is start small, learn. The nice patch about clubroot patch management is that if we ask for 10 tons per the acre like this particular patch has on it, that's only a 20 kilogram bag. So in a small area, it's really not a problem. But the transportation and the logistics when we start talking about a field mean that you have to sharpen your pencil and figure out where it's best and most appropriately placed.
Now, where are we at with clubroot patches? I mean, obviously it can vary, but what sorts of areas for size-wise would people be considering liming in a field?
You know, so I would say that we're going to restrict clubroot patch management with lime to small patches. Because the pH that we're looking for at 7.2, it's a logarithmic scale. So pH 5 is 10 times less than pH 6, but it's 100 times less than pH 7. So you need proportionally more and more product to push that pH up. So this is going to be a small area, and small is relative to each grower, but I would suggest that this is when you have discrete, small patches in the field and you're relatively confident that that's isolated to that. You would use this as an additional management technique, particularly if you perhaps didn't want to grass an area, but you still wanted to push that clubroot down and suppress it a little bit more. One of the challenges with clubroot is that it's been around for 10 or 15 years and we're still struggling with managing this disease. We've had really good success with clubroot resistant genetics. We've begun to realize that lengthening your rotation is a real requirement to that 1 in 3. Now, 2 tools in the toolbox are probably not quite enough for you. We will get you additional clubroot resistant genetics, but we need to foster and steward those and take care of those really well. So if you have clubroot resistance breakdown in your field, or if you've got clubroot newly established in an area where it hasn't been before, you should really consider doing some patch management techniques. Because clubroot isn't a canola problem, or you shouldn't consider it as a canola problem. You should consider it as a soil problem. And if you move that plant material with the galls on it, or even if you move the soil with the spores in it, it can really spread and become established elsewhere on your farm or on your neighbor's farm. So one of the other tricks that we'll talk about in terms of trying to manage that disease is seeding that area to grass, liming it, doing some other steps to make sure either that soil doesn't move, or where that soil is that clubroot's not quite so happy, because clubroot can produce a lot of spores, a lot of seed to get the next generation going. And if we're not careful, if you're a betting man, I think you should bet on clubroot. If you'd like to win that battle, lengthen your rotation, use clubroot resistant genetics wisely, and adopt some techniques like patch management.